You're listening to Music Mythology. My name is Sam Romo, and let's talk about some music. All right, here we go. Ziggy Stardust. Sam Romo here, sitting down with my dad, going over I know it's one of our mutually favorite Bowie albums. Probably one of his most classic. Trying to think. Just want to make sure I get the full title right before we get this officially started. So it's The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars. It's released June 16th, 1972. Basically 1 year right after Hunky Dory. It's a very unique album. It's a concept album, but when you see like interviews with them, whether it was Angie Bowie or David or Ronson or any of the Spiders from Mars, it's a loose concept. It was something that they kind of pieced together as they were coming up with it. It wasn't, kind of like Sgt. Pepper. Well, that's conceptual, but it's kind of loose. There's not like a strong backbone to it. Although with Ziggy, I would say it's more of a straightforward concept because there's a lead character. There's an environment that he's building. There's a lot of different characters and stuff like that. But anyways, do you have anything to say? Or?
Well, when you said it came out in 1972, I remember that would be, I would be, I guess a freshman in high school. And so I was listening to a lot of music at the time, and the whole thing from England, T-Rex and Bowie and those things were beginning to pop up on television. There was a show that they would show at night called In Concert. They would actually put on different shows and different rock bands from around the country and the world. I think it was one of the first times I saw Bowie. And so, like you said, that the concept album plus he created a persona. He created someone, that identity, that people identify with that character, almost like he was thinking almost like movies, he wanted to create someone that he could put out on the stage that could perform. They were looking at the concept of performing as part of their music, which that was kind of a different concept in a sense. And of course it had to be something little controversial, shocking, because it caught people's attention.
Yeah. Stick. Well, it's a very, the concept itself is of a alien, gay or bi, superhero basically coming down to Earth to save the Earth with his music and his message. It's definitely not typical for that time, because this was June 16th, 1972 when it came out, and then Hunky Dory was a year before that, and with that album and the album prior, The Man Who Sold the World, you see a very long-haired Bowie, and even on the cover of both of them, he's wearing a dress.
Yeah.
And when you listen to it, they're very, I don't know, like we were just talking about this the other day. They're not, when you hear Space Oddity and the album that came out, or the music that came out with that song on his original albums and his first songs in the original album, it's just not, it's not as in your face. It's more of the typical 60s music. And then when you get to that, The Man Who Sold the World, it's you have Ronson, who's adding in this proto-punk heavy guitar. It's just like, it's just taking him up a notch, because prior to that, you just had Bowie with the long-haired hippie kind of look, but it was because he was just in that normal garb. He went from a mod look to the long-haired look, and he was always playing his guitar and a saxophone. But then when you bring in what it would become the Spiders from Mars, that just introduces that real rock element, that like foundation of I don't want to just say like his wall of sound, but like what you kind of would expect. You'd want to hear the hard hitting beat, this primal, intense guitar, and his unique vocals and his lyrics and story, writing. But by the time you get to this album, it's like he's over that. It's like you need the next thing. And it was actually because I was watching that documentary, the Beside Bowie, the Ronson story, and then there's another documentary for this album where they interview the Spiders and Angie, and which was his wife from 1970 to 1980. And she talks about how, they could tell, he was so theatrical and just so out there that like they needed an approach that fit the bill, fit the personality. And so she started pushing him to, commenting that there needs to be more theater in it. There needs to be something that fits his personality. And so she arranged meeting with tailors to look at, or going to shops and looking for those outrageous outfits, meeting these artists. I mean, they were all in the scene, but I mean, she's a very like driven person, and she comes from marketing, and so that was like almost like her responsibility to the group was the outside perspective, the appreciation of what they're doing, but let's help curate it right. And so it's interesting. I mean, yeah, she's the one that showed, that's how he was led to that outfit he would wear when he would do the tour as Ziggy, the gold and red and, very out there looking colors, something like the Fool would make at the time or something like that, was very, vibrant and just different, definitely eye-catching. But yeah, again, like we've said before, once he meets Ronson and they click, I mean, they just click to where they understood each other. When Bowie would present something, he knew how to accompany it with that guitar, with his guitar style, but with a style that added on. I mean, it was like a spice. It was like, I mean, it's like you listen to Space Oddity, and it's filled with so much complexity, and it's all over the place. But then you listen to Hunky Dory, Man Who Sold the World, and then this album, and that guitar is like the backbone of it. It's like especially since the majority of those three albums, it is that kind of proto-punk period. Mm-hmm. So he's carving out that lane of what we've said before, is at that time, like there's a lot of general definitions of rock. There weren't these, subgenres laid out and identified yet. And so with him, that was so probably enthralling to a lot of those new audiences of just like, what is that? What is that sound? It's like, it sounds, just otherworldly. And I think that's what matches their aesthetic and their sound to this album very well. And why it all kind of came to a great, pinnacle of expression, of showing that that's what they were going for. I didn't want to be typical. I didn't want to be expected. And he proves that in later tours and personas and on and on. But in this one, it was like the first huge step in the, like, we want you to know that we're not trying to be of this world.
Yeah, it was very flashy, flamboyant, like you said, coming from the Hunky Dory period, which was very gay, drag queenish. He wanted the flash and the flamboyancy of that, but he also wanted the otherworldliness, the space oddity character concept. So he comes up with Ziggy. He wants to make a record where he has a theatrical persona that he can perform. And like you said about Angie, some of the stuff I read was that they would go to, he would take the band, or they would watch theater and ballet just to see how they moved and the things that they did to project their characters, so that they would be better. They would be thinking in terms of theater too. In other words, this is what's happening in the 70s with, I would say maybe the American parallel to a certain extent would be Alice Cooper, because Alice Cooper is happening at the same time. And Cooper is similar in the sense that he creates a persona called Alice Cooper. And so when he comes on stage, they perform. They're playing music, but they have a performance that people expect to see. Bowie's doing the same thing. But he decides, okay, I'm going to be the show. I'm going to be Ziggy Stardust. And as you see, especially in that time period, the fans and the people just get totally immersed in his character. They think he's Ziggy. They're assuming you're going to always be Ziggy. To Bowie, it's just another persona, which we know that's what he does. But this happens to be his big breakout, you know.
Yeah, and this is more of almost like what you're saying, his the influence of the musicals and ballet and stuff like that. And this album plays out like a rock opera. You know, it's more theatrical. And I mean, so the tours, and that was another thing I looked into was the film for this album, and you know, similar to the Let It Be documentary, it's kind of limited by the capabilities of the time, like the lighting capabilities, the audio. I mean, it captures some moments for sure, but it's dark. You know, it's not. I don't know.
Yeah, you can't see it very well.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's like if you're a super fan, like you're gonna respect it and you're gonna appreciate it. But it's like if you're trying to use this as your immersive experience of what it was like, it's probably not gonna, especially in modern times, like with how, you know, outrageous, you know, live concert films can be. You know, it's a little lackluster, but the sorry, I'm getting sidetracked. I wanted to talk about how the concept of the alien rock and roll star, how it's poetic, because it's to me it's like, you know, it's a self-reflection. It's the, you know, there's nothing very typical about the guy already, but it's almost like, I mean, this is speculation, but it's almost like, you know, if he's trying so hard to become this rock and roll star, this influence, this cultural influence in society or whatever he wanted it to be, then it's like Ziggy is like the epitome of that. Because I mean, it's like the hero that comes on a mission and he's received well. You know, he's immediately put on the radio. You know, it's just like it speaks to that ego of a superstar. And you know, and you see it evolve, you know, later on, like with Aladdin Sane and Thin White Duke. I mean, he goes nuts. He goes straight into that stardom life and just gets, you know.
Well, doesn't he say making love to his ego? Ziggy sucked up into his mind, and that's really, to me, it's like, okay, that's what he was doing. You know, he was the leper messiah, right? That's right. So what was the guy that was the American and he went to France? Did you come across that? There was this guy who went to France and he had been a semi-popular person in America, a musician. But he goes to France and he has this big breakout, and the French people love him. And but he gets so caught up in himself, in his performing, and his I guess the explosiveness of his short, you know, meteoric career. I don't know if he takes drugs or he loses it, and he comes out one night on a stage dressed like Jesus, and he says, "I'm no longer who I was. I'm the Messiah, and I'm here to." Yeah. And, Bowie was fascinated with that guy, and so that's where he gets the genesis, the idea of okay, I'm going to make a character based on him, and he gets the name, you know, Ziggy Stardust, and he get it from I think he saw it in front of a building or something.
Well, I know he gets, like, Ziggy he wanted like kind of a Christian name, and out of left field, kind of atypical Christian name, and so he picked that, and then Stardust. So I think I can't remember the man you're describing. I know I have his album on my phone just for the sake of remembering, but I know that one of the interesting things I didn't know about this is that the Stardust part of the name comes from an artist named the legendary Stardust Cowboy. Yeah. And he's like the founder of that psychobilly, like, nonsense kind of like just rambling over, like, just, you know, that kind of bluesy country rock stuff. And it's just madness. I mean, the guy would play the crazy guitar with the trumpet in his hand and then go off and play the trumpet while just yelling and hooting and hollering. And the dude was from Grand Prairie. So it's funny.
Something in the water.
I mean, he's literally a stone throw away from where we are right now.
Is Vince Taylor? That was
Vince Taylor. Yes, that's what it is. Yeah, and he was. Yeah, he like went on an ego trip and was saying he was sent by God, and
he had a breakdown.
Yeah. But yeah, so like those were kind of like the name and character, and like what we were talking about before, you had people like Mark Bolan and T-Rex. that were those glam rock pioneers that were already wearing makeup. They were already using these space themes in their later 60s types of music. And he definitely drew from that. I mean, this is all kind of a culmination and kind of respect or homage to that energy, see, just looking at my notes to see if I have anything to mention, anything else. But yeah, I did want to say it like this too, is like the concept of adding more aspects to their shows and to the concept of the artists themselves. I mean, that was the other dimension to it that was really taking shape in this period, because it's one of my favorite little docuseries, the CNN Decades series, where they'll have an episode for each kind of aspect of culture in America,
right?
And or the world history. I'm sorry, and it's there's always a music episode, and those are really interesting. If you haven't seen them, you should check them out. But the 70s one is really interesting because they talk about that aspect of theater coming into play, like the stage complexity, just ever evolving of showing they're not just satisfied with just a good guy on a guitar doing a good job and singing well on the stage. They need to see something too. They need to be just inundated by senses, by sensation, and just feeling like there's lights, there's lasers, there's smoke, there's video, there's paintings, there's cutouts moving, there's all sorts of things, and this was one of those first swipes at that, because I mean, you probably expect something like that to come out of the Beatles, maybe if they were still touring, but that wasn't their bag. That's not what they did. And so it's like someone had to pick that up. Someone had to realize
he takes the Sgt. Pepper's concept and decides he wants to perform it. He doesn't want to stay in a studio. And so he wants that interaction of the fans, but he also wants to be able to display, right? In other words, what's the purpose of a character if you can't put him out in front of people and see how they react to him?
Well, and my little note, I thought this was funny. Well, Bowie wanted to enhance the sound and vision of the impact of their act.
Even as it says on the CD, and I think it's on the album too, at the very small line note, there's just one last note that says, "This is meant to be played at maximum volume." Oh yeah. So the fact that they were rocking, but he's coming out with a glam look, with the reddish orange hair and the kabuki kind of look, and the different costumes, and it was obvious that it was making the audience want to anticipate, well, what is he going to do next?
Yeah.
And how is he going to move? And and so you're not just listening to the music, but you're watching the performer. And it's becoming a total experience, which is exactly what he wanted, right, to a certain degree. Because like you said, with Vince Taylor, he watched this guy become a big hit, and then he just imploded on himself. And he's like, okay, I'm going to use that theme, and that's going to be Ziggy, except he's going to come from outer space, and he's going to try to come in and interact with people, but then he's going to implode. He's going to go crazy. Yeah. And one of the things I was reading when I was looking and thinking about this and preparing for it was that he it foreshadowed what was going to happen to Bowie as he went on in his career. But he wanted that flash. He wanted that.
Well, and the Spiders, I mean, in that documentary, they comment that they saw him. They saw him change, and like that period, the hunky dory, Ziggy period, to them it was all kind of the same, because they lived at his house with that him and Angie owned, and so they said that they literally for a year solid they lived in his house in sleeping bags, just wake up every morning, make coffee and breakfast, jam all day, figure it out. That's all they were doing constantly. And then once they got on the road and it became marketable and presentable and craved by an audience, they saw his ego start to take over and him actually turn into the character. Yeah, it's very interesting. And then the thing you're saying about how, people didn't know what to expect and stuff like that. It's interesting because even RCA, his label, they didn't know how to market it because that's what they kept telling them, that he's going in a new direction. Like, so what does that mean? Like, what if we don't know how to handle that? And so this album wasn't originally received well commercially. Like it didn't sell well immediately. The critics that paid attention to it enjoyed it. But it wasn't something that just, broke through and cut through like a knife in the market. And people were like, this is the future. It was a very like oddity that was just kind of in the background. And if you saw it, you must be in that scene, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Now, again, I remember, in high school and getting into that, watching this come to, rising up this movement or whatever, the theatrical rock, glam rock, punk rock, because part of it was the show, part of it was the, and so you got an audience because people wanted to check you out and watch what you were doing. But if you actually could play music, then they realized, well, this is just good music. And then, like I told you, that was also the rise of the FM radio. So they would play the music that wouldn't be played on pop stations. They didn't care whether you had a 45 or a single. If they liked the music, they played the music. Yeah. And people who were following that were listening and said, okay, well, I like this song. Or like you said about the, RCA, they insisted that he come up with some kind of a, song that had a good sound. And so he made Starman. Yeah. Which that one's kind of funny because it was one of the last ones he wrote. And the only reason why he had it, made it, was because of that request, because they realized they needed to make him approachable somehow. And they needed a single, especially back then, that's what you had to do. And what's funny is that song wasn't planned. And it would actually replace a cover, Chuck Berry cover song that was going to be on the album. And so it's just interesting because Angie talks about that in that documentary about how, just almost like it just came to him. Like it's just last minute thing. Yeah, but then it was one of the most successful songs on the album. Yeah, several of the recollections I was reading about, people that are now, play bands or make music, or that they said when they saw that song played on the pop shows, that was it. That was that's what captivated them and made them want to play music or get involved in that kind of stuff, because they had never seen someone come out like that, dressed like a Starman, and then just the sound of the music, and so it was different. And I think, like you said, Ronson, my perspective with Ronson is, if you take Ronson out of Ziggy Stardust, it's going to be completely different. Because his style, his play, his music, his guitar makes that sound. Yeah. And he gave, I don't know, Bowie the edgy, dangerous look. Yeah. I mean, right. Well, yeah, he offset Bowie to be like this. It's like they still, like, when you looked at how they dressed and how they did things, they still looked, similar, like glam wise and whatever. But then when you saw their musical approaches, it was so different. And in like what you're saying, like Bowie wouldn't be the same. His sound wouldn't be dubbed the same without him. It would be like Zeppelin without Jimmy Page. It'd be like you take that out, you could replace it. They would be something completely different. It would be totally different. Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting though, because RCA still invested a lot in them, even though they had some flops. I mean, I read that Moon Age Daydream was released prior to the concept of Ziggy, and he recorded it with a different band, and it was released as a single, and it totally flopped. It totally flopped. But they still invest a lot of money in them. And the fact that when they said that when they toured, I think with Hunky Dory, they only went to 6 U.S. cities, but they paid it was high end touring. It was in the suites, and they're going to take limos and all that stuff. And so it was they had never tasted that, the group itself. And so it's this album really is kind of that evolution into stardom for him and the group. But for the group, it's like what you said. He moved on. He liked to swap out personas, swap out session musicians, swap out the tour musicians, and like Ronson talks about, or not Ronson, I'm sorry, the bassist in that documentary. He talks about how post tour they were
they didn't have any profit. Like the band itself, when they moved on, like RCA just moved on without them. And but so it's pretty crazy that you look at those works as being so, classic and so inspirational to a lot of musicians, but just the market didn't lean towards that artist being paid their share post career or whatever. But I mean, that's kind of typical during that period, especially if you're being led by someone who's just, constantly being approached by people, wanting to collaborate with other people. And I mean, he worked with so many. I mean, that's a really crazy thing about his entire span of his career, from working from a Texas guitarist. I mean, I'm talking about Stevie Ray Vaughan, and working with Brian Eno and even Trent Reznor in the 90s. I mean, it's like he just like every decade or every couple of years or every album, he wanted to.
He's the chameleon. He has to change.
Yeah, he wanted to shuffle the deck.
He doesn't tell the band though, right? That he's going to shed his skin and leave the Ziggy Stardust behind.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing is, like I'm talking about their dynamic when they're making and writing those albums. They were so close knit, almost like the Beatles, where they went everywhere together. Those first 4 or 5 years, and when they were big and touring, they went everywhere together. Their failures were all their failures. Their successes were all their successes. But he was the writer. And they say that by the time they got to Ziggy, a lot of this, he left up to them. Like especially Ronson. Ronson solos were either he just did them himself and then incorporated them, or they were unrehearsed and they threw it together and it worked out. But it wasn't David controlling him, but everything else was he had an expectation of how it was going, and it wasn't until this album that he'd really start to be a driving force like that, more of a bulldozer. And obviously fame, drugs, and the larger tours through America, I'm sure affected him, and started to get that, especially at that time, we're talking the early 70s, that environment in rock and roll was pretty volatile, because you're either with the people, like when we've talked about Neil Young and stuff, I mean, the people he toured with, people he worked with, I mean, he was losing people, every now and then, and you just reeled from it, because that was the environment, it was just different. It was just totally different, and it started to affect David Bowie in a sense where he just liked it, and he liked to be the man, liked to be the
center. Yeah, already decided that he would be the. I think you see that with Ziggy. I mean, in other words, how are you going to sell that if you don't believe that you're the man? I mean, the Lad Insane, right? I mean, that's where he kind of morphs from Ziggy to Lad Insane, and it gets kind of almost like he realizes, well, where do I go from here? You know what I mean? But he's already thinking several steps ahead. But when you hear Ziggy Stardust, I mean, for the first time, especially in that day, in that period, it's like, well, what is this? It's like almost like Sgt. Pepper's. What are they doing? What is this music about? And like you said, I mean, they made a concept album, but they didn't really say they went at it as a concept album. Right. But I think that was his intention, to make to have a character, build a story around it. Yeah. And especially when you perform it, you're gonna perform it, not just sing it. You're gonna perform it.
And I think Angie talks about that was purposely done too with this album. Is with Hunky Dory, a lot of it was written and performed with him on the piano, and they realized that. There's songs like Changes and Life on Mars and Queen Bitch and like, Oh You Pretty Little Things. But even that one's kind of like a little, so you might not tour that one, especially at that time. People would want something really lively. But that was a purposely done thing in this album, is they wanted to make it tourable, give them good hooks so the crowd knows what to say and can get into it. And again, Ronson, I think, is a big cue to the audience of when the excitement comes in, when you're supposed to be thrilled, with that primal, intense sound. He's the the like when you're in a live audience on a TV show and then they say something funny and you get the laugh sign. He's the excitement sign, like in Bowie's music. It's like when you hear the guitar coming, you're like, here comes the electricity, because it's palpable. Like the things he wrote or just performed, because some of it was ad libbed. He did it in that session, and there it is. That's good. We got it. It was just so unique and just so captivating. And it's interesting that he met Ronson through the drummer only because Tony Visconti, the RCA exec, he wanted a different turn on things, and the drummer was like, yeah, I know this guy who's a guitarist. He's a gardener, but he's a stellar guitarist. You should give him a shot. And then when they met him, it was just like, it was instant. It's like, what? Like his styling. Because that's the thing, I'm a guitarist, and you're drawn to certain patterns, certain chords, certain placement on the boards, and you start to build your character, your play style and character, and it's a culmination of what you've learned, who you've learned from. Sometimes it's on accident. Sometimes it's you're just experimenting, or it's on accident. You find an arrangement or a scale that you hadn't practiced yet. But then in someone like him who turned into his career, he became more focused on it, and I think it was just that internal passion that kept him looking for something that just was totally unique, not traditional, not classical. I'm not going for a style. I'm carving out something that I would like, and it's this intensity, and especially at that time that he got on board with them, it would have been for the man who sold the world. Or by the time they were recording that, and that was what, 69, and so 69 is kind of like 68, 69, it's kind of like that jumping off point for that heavier rock sound.
It's pivotal time.
Because that's Zeppelin busting out, that's the White Album releasing with Helter Skelter and Your Blues, and so I'm just using that as an example of a very popular band still going towards a harder sound. Yeah. And the Who getting more intense. I mean, everybody was
getting more intense.
Yeah, oh yeah. Even Pink Floyd eventually stepping up how complex their sounds and arrangements would be. It was just, that was like I just feel like that was a big year for inspiration for that, and lean, like in the market, like leaning towards that sound. And Black Sabbath and bands like that popping up in those 2 years. So I feel like him coming around and being melded into the band and into Bowie, and it just exuded that kind of energy that was around. This isn't the 1960s 66, 67, like Summer of Love type of vibe. This is something aggressive and different.
Yeah, it's different. Yeah, he creates that performance, that theater performance character. What keeps coming to my mind is when you look at Peter Gabriel in Genesis, he was very similar in the sense that he loved theater, and he would wear different costumes and elaborate costumes, and he would weave all this to perform and to play the music, which is very intense, progressive rock. But I remember the year after he left Genesis, we actually saw him during high school, and Gabriel comes out very similar to Bowie. He doesn't wear anything. He's got just a black outfit on, but he still is theatrical. He's doing mime, and he's moving in very specific theatrical ways to still project that drama and theater. Yeah. And so I'm saying it's like they're wanting to project this character, in other words, they're saying this is more than just music, and we want to perform, we want to do stuff. And it's like some bands do it good, some bands don't. Like you said, some of it's planned and some of it's just spur of the moment. They just happen to do it. Yeah. I think it was probably one of the band members I read a quote from that said, when we were working on this and doing this, we had no idea people would still be talking about it for 30 years later and still discussing it. And he said, we just were putting an album together, and we just thought, we'll just do this, and the character's going to, Bowie's got the idea for the character. And how did he know that, it was going to be that huge? But more than likely he probably was already thinking ahead and thinking, well, I'm going to morph into something else. I'm going to do something different.
Yeah.
And each phase, I'm just going to leave behind the thing I did before, you know. And
well, like any prideful person, you might not know what's next, but you're going to be great at it.
Yeah.
and you might be the best if your ego is so swollen.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, like Ziggy says, I mean, you know, he sucked up into his mind. I mean, but it was quite a show. I mean, you know, it drew people, it made people mad and angry, but they still couldn't. It's like you still had to watch the train wreck. You couldn't keep your eyes off of it, you know. And so it's that same thing in the 70s, you know, where the rock and roll becomes the thing that, you know, creates the schisms in generations. And, you know, there's music, there's pop music, there's even rock music, but what is this?
Right.
You know, why are they doing that? Why is he dressed like that? What is, you know, and I mean, even now, I mean, because I was listening to the music and I was thinking, well, it's still very good. I mean, you know, there's some very well done songs on there. The arrangements very, very good. The sound quality is very good. It holds up. You know, it still is interesting to listen to.
Yeah. Well, and that glam rock period was interesting because that was when a lot of different artists, I mean, like him, started to evolve and realize that they didn't have to stay in a certain boundary by watching people like T-Rex and stuff like that. I mean, even like Bob Dylan, like, here, hold on. What's that album called? Hard Rain. It's a live album, and like, yeah, he's got mascara on, he's got makeup on, and
what do you call it? White faces almost. He has this really
so
bizarre
much makeup, But it was because he had started to same thing. He started to lean towards that music because it's like, what is that?
Yeah.
And that's interesting. And that was only like a year and a half or 2 year like period. But like, to me, I'm not the biggest Bob Dylan fan. I'm sorry. But that's the one, like that album. I really like that album, and any touring recordings that I've heard, like live stuff from that tour. He takes those songs that he performed before, and they're all songs that he performed when he went electric, but he like amped them up.
Yeah.
And I think that was, and if you listen to, I mean, they're all like super high energy. The percussion is like super fast and hard. The guitar is just like in your face. It's not what you would think of, you know, when you think of Dylan. And especially when you see the album cover, and you see him in the makeup, you're like, I wouldn't, you know, I didn't think of that. And I like, it's kind of interesting, but very, very unique time. Do you have anything else? Just kind of general on it?
No.
Okay, cool. Well, we can start going track by track.
Okay.
It starts off with 5 years, which has that opening beat, that steady low beat. It's almost like the pulse of the song, you know, like the heartbeat of the song. I really liked it. The first half of the album is my side A, I guess, is like my favorite side, just because I guess it's kind of more on the positive side while still being, you know, doom riddled, you know, with these, you know, innuendos of the end of the earth coming. But it's still the music, the way it's composed, there's still that different feel to it. Like this one, I like how, you know, it starts off like he's calm and he's talking like to him, basically it seems like he's talking from perspectives of earthlings, whether they're kids or they're people, adults. And then by the end of it, he's talking from Ziggy's perspective, almost like a warning, yelling out, you know, there's only 5 years. And this track kind of sets the stage of that doom state of the earth, that, you know, a looming Armageddon. We only have 5 years to do something about it, and this, you know, alien rock star has appeared to warn us of this. And like this one is also kind of proto-punk, because although it's calm, by the end of it he's screaming. And he's just in the intensity. But yeah, the song sets the stage for the concept. The middle parts that describe different people's like perspectives, like from a soldier, who hears it, and the soldier with a broken arm, so he's come back and he's reeling from it because it says a soldier staring at a steering wheel. Like there's a girl that loses her mind. It's just all kinds of stuff. People respond to it differently. They either shut down, they get more volatile.
Well, I see it being almost a very cinematic imagery. I think I saw you in an ice cream parlor drinking milkshakes cold and long, smiling and waving and looking so fine. It's describing. I think it even says in one of the things I read that he had been really impressed with an actress, and so that's kind of a little bit of he's alluding to that. But my point is, like you said, it's like an overview of like almost like snippets of a movie,
right?
As he's describing scenes.
Well, it's very dynamic. It's like as he's describing it, and you can see it, you can imagine, and it's the little details that make it that make it relatable. Like the soldier, it's like saying that with a broken arm, you can picture this guy sitting bunched up in his car, staring at his steering wheel because he's just zoning out, doesn't know how to reel from it. And in other lines, like here, sorry, let me move my mic up really quick. Like the one where he says, he creates scenes. He's creating these theatric scenes that you can visualize, like where he says, a cop knelt and kissed the feet of a priest and a queer threw up at the side of that. It's like it's his first mention of some form of sexual orientation on this album, but it's like it's a side statement of culture at the time, and it's also he's setting up that scene that you could see that. Sorry. Oh, that was the fridge. Sorry, I could hear the hissing. So it's very unique because he's talking about relatable things, but also talking about parts of culture that people might not agree with. But he's talking about it because it's still relevant. Yeah, it's still relative.
Well, the phrase keeps coming to me: 5 years stuck on my eyes. It's almost like that's how you would see things, right? In your memory, you stuck on my eyes. He's looking at things and making observations, and some of them are, basic simple things that everybody sees, but at the same time, I think it's very cinematic. It's very, it has that feel of a movie, of a sweep of things, and kind of like you said, it's introducing, what's happening, what is the setting for what's about to happen. This being is going to be presented.
Well, my favorite line from the song is towards the end. He says, and it was cold and it rained, so I felt like an actor. And I thought of Ma, and I want to go back there. Your face, your race, the way that you talk. I kiss you, you're beautiful. I want you to walk. Yeah, I love that line. It's so inspirational. Because that line in itself, I feel like is directed towards the person who doesn't know who they are yet, or is still figuring themselves out, and he's kind of telling you, all that you are is all that you are, and you just need to stay at it. And I don't know, and especially for like he's referencing this, this queer bisexual star, or even just the people that he's describing, because that was just a person that he was describing, like an earthling. So it's almost that self-awareness of like, you may be different, but that's what makes you beautiful.
I also see it being it's where do you go to when you're hiding? You go to the movies, right? You sit and you watch a movie. You get immersed in a film or a scene. So I kiss you, you're beautiful, I want you to walk. It's very cinematic. You know what I mean? There's what are the scenes you see so many times? Like they kiss, you're beautiful, and people are walking away, or those.
Well, I also take this line as an interpretation of that relatable feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but what all of us feel like when we see a superstar or a celebrity, and they have that, and I'll just call it the X factor. They have something about them that makes them different, right? Yeah. What got them there? You
want to watch.
Well, but there's something there that got them there, because I'm not there, so they're different, right? And so that's what it gives me that imagery of, is this is kind of someone mulling over that X factor and not realizing it, like realizing that like you're wrapped up in the person that you may be one day if you stay disciplined at it. Like by saying like, you know, like a kid feels like a superhero when they're jumping through the air because, you know, it's like I'm flying. And it's like in this one, he's more dramatic though as an adult. You know, more melancholy, adult, serious thing. Where it's rain. It was cold and it rained and it was on cue. So I felt like an actor. You know, I thought about my family and my connection to my family. And I want to go back there and thinking about all that you are as that, I don't know, as that person you're developing, and that you still think of where you're coming from, but you have these cues that set you up to be, you know, because I just take that first line and I felt like an actor. It's like I'm somewhere different. I'm on the road to something different. And
well, it's that again. I think it's that big screen imagery. You know, you're watching them, and so to me, it's almost like he's saying, what I want is you to watch me. In other words, I'm going to create an actor. I'm going to create a character, and I want you to watch me. You know, because I'm going to perform. Yeah. I'm gonna, and so in a sense, it's kind of it's taking a Sgt. Pepper concept to a different level or a different direction, because the Beatles didn't necessarily ask you to follow Sgt. Pepper or look or believe in Sgt. Pepper. He's basically saying, I'm gonna present Ziggy to you.
Yeah, it's some kind of like Messiah type.
Yeah, and I want you to see why they followed him.
Right.
You know, what was it that drove people to him? But again, it's very much cinematic. I just keep going back to that word. He sees the imagery. He sees the concepts of, you know, what is it that people do when they watch a movie or they get caught up in a character. That's what he's going to do.
Yeah,
you're going to get caught up in this character. You know, and so he has to be big. He has to be flamboyant. He has to be different. Otherwise, you're not going to pay attention to him.
Right. And then like we said before, then it ends with him screaming, and it's more like he's screaming as Ziggy as a warning. And then it's still ending with that steady beat, with that pulse.
Yeah, and the kind of screeching strings, you know.
Yeah.
Like something's coming.
Something's looming. Something
very
chaos.
Science fiction-ish.
Yeah, it is. And then it moves into Soul Love, which is one of my favorite on the album. Starman used to be my favorite for the longest time, but this one might start to become my favorite. I like the same thing. I like the imagery, the scenes he sets up. I love the energy of the song. It's kind of got this. It's more positive. It's more. That's what it is. It's like this one was the doom looming intro, or the first one. I'm sorry. 5 years, and then Soul Love is more of the optimistic embrace of what's going on. But it's more kind of like jazz like. It's got the sax in it. Mm-hmm. But with a hard rock like chorus, which is very interesting because it's kind of groovy, and then all of a sudden it comes in harder, and it goes back into the groove, and then it comes back. But it's the love experience from different perspectives, basically. Like, because you see a mother, grieving her fallen son who was a soldier. You see a new love with a boy and a girl. You're talking about, spiritual love and passion. I mean, like in the chorus where he says, just to touch the flaming dove. Like, to me, like that's like that's what that is to me. And soul love, when he talks about the priests and stuff like that. My favorite line in this song is, inspirations have I none, just to touch the flaming dove. All I have is my love of love, but love is not loving.
Yeah, but love is not loving.
Yeah, that last line is my favorite of that entire favorite line, because what that, to me, my impression of that is, love is not loving. It's that love isn't just the act of you loving something. Love is the cohesion of both sides, of that they love you in return. That is what love is, that mutual respect and appreciation. And I love that line. I think it's a car. I love that line, and the way it's composed in the song, where it's like that's the last thing he says, and you come in with that sax solo. I love that. That's an awesome sax solo by Bowie, by the way. And I do like this song, how there's still guitar in it, like besides the chorus, the heavier part, there's a guitar in it, but the guitar is almost like an ad lib. It's in the background doing these little like, little, like sometimes he's just like, he's going, like he doesn't even do a full power chord or anything. He just takes it and runs up the fretboard just for that crazy distorted sound in the background, or a little like ding ding ding. He's plucking like just a few sequences in the background. But yeah, and that guitar solo just cuts through. It's so strong at the end. Or it plays it out towards the end. But yeah, that's a really cool song. I really enjoy this one. Do you have anything else on that one? And then it leads into immediately, like as soon as it ends, it starts off with Moon Age Daydream, which has now become more of a well-known classic of Bowie's, due to I've seen in like 2 TV shows you have used it in the last few years, and it was in Guardians of the Galaxy. I think it was Guardians of the Galaxy that kind of upped the game on people's awareness, like a broader awareness of the song, because that song fit the vibe of Guardians really well.
It's a definite space song.
But yeah, that's another one of my favorites on this album, just because it's so high energy. It keeps you entertained the whole way in and out. It's hard hitting the whole time. And I read that he wrote this, I mentioned this earlier, that he wrote this when he was touring in America like a couple of years prior, and he recorded it. I think it was with another band called maybe the Acorns or something like that. But a band that he wasn't with for
actually
a long time.
On that CD you gave me, the CD, the 2. I think they have this.
Do they have that version?
The version, and it's very different.
Yeah,
it's almost hickish, hillbilly-ish. Yeah, it's very different, totally different.
Well, it flopped big time.
Big time. I can see why. Yeah.
And I think the B side, I think it's "Hang On to Yourself" was the B side. Yeah, and it was totally different, and it also had to be rewritten. So yeah, because when I first read that, I was like, "This flop? What do you mean?" And then it was like, "Oh, it's totally, Ronson." That's the thing too. This, I feel like this and Ziggy Stardust, the track itself, those are like prime Ronson on this album, because like he's leading the way. And the other thing I didn't know is he was the pianist on the album. And he was he did most of the string arrangement.
I saw that him and Bowie did the arrangements, but it was Ronson who did a lot of them.
Yeah. And you see his versatility when he breaks off from here and works with Lou Reed on Transformer and other stuff. But like he's like a underappreciated.
No, he doesn't.
Person.
I don't think he gets enough recognition for what he did. And to me, Moon Age Daydream is definitely one of the songs that defines Bowie. It would be, if you were to tell me, well, what song do you think would you tell someone, listen to this because it's Bowie? Well, it's Moon Age Daydream to me, because it's so different. It's so science fiction-y and space and space age.
But proud and flashy.
It's even the arrangement, the way it's done. It's a very different song. And it still is a different song when you listen to it. It has a very unique structure.
Well, it fits the bill of an alien rock star.
Oh, big time. It fits them completely.
Yeah.
And you see them both, I guess it's where they really mesh, where like if you want to compare them, it's like when Lennon and McCartney really connect on a song or they do something, they create something that's different, that's unique to them. And that, to me, this song is that for them.
Yeah.
That it shows their creativity, that they were willing to try that style, which is, especially when you listen to the other version, it's a far cry. It's totally different. But it's also very different from anything that was happening at that time, to a certain degree. So I'm sure that in that day, when people heard that song for the first time, like, what is that? But to see him on stage, then you realize, oh, okay, he's that. That's what he is.
Well, this is really Ziggy's intro.
This is Ziggy,
because the first two are more Like, I mean, honestly, well, the first track sets the tone, but it doesn't describe the character really. The second one could be on, I don't want to say any album, but Soul Love doesn't necessarily have to be on this concept album, right. But then this one is a very clear cut, conceptual piece explaining, his attitude and it's got that heavy proto punk rock, guitar. But it's I mean, this is the first song that really describes the character himself, by using, like alligator, like he's aggressive, he's a
ray gun to my head.
Yeah. He's a space invader. He's a rock and rolling bitch. Like he, cause that's the thing about this album. He swaps out the gender of Ziggy, every other song. It's something a little different. And that's what that's what it is. It's just, it's totally different, and he's this aggressive, space traveling, a proud character, but he's come because he knows the Earth needs them. He needs him, whether it's because to him the solution is rock, and because the audience of the world is now appreciative of this magic that he can bring and actually do things with. But the song itself, like it doesn't tie into that mission of coming to Earth. It's all about, this is who the character is. It's a pretty fun ride of a song using the space themes and stuff. It's very interesting. It's a great song. It's a memorable song. You're not going to forget it. It's high energy. It's kind of like Mark Bolan inspired, because at that time period, especially the last 2 years, he got more, and so did like people like Pink Floyd and stuff. That late 60s period is where you kind of get that space rock. There was like that stint of time where like everybody was trying out something that was kind of that spacey rock sound, or trance rock, just something different. And this one though, it takes that, but then it just cranks it up to 11. Yeah. and then on top of that, it ends with a gnarly solo by Ronson that I didn't know this, but it was mostly improv that day. So that crazy ending to the song is just totally just him, everybody just taking hands off and just letting Ronno in the corner just go nuts, that's awesome. It's an incredible song. Love it. You got anything else on that one? No. Cool. And the next one is Starman, which we've already touched on how the only reason why it existed was RCA had requested a single that was approachable, and that they could send out, because I'm sure they might have been a little weirded out because they don't know what he's changing all the time. They said he's going to be something different for the tour, and then like we've talked about, his last singles weren't. Hunky Dory was successful, but it was successful later on. Like it wasn't like an immediate explosion for them. And that was like the interesting thing that Angie and them mentioned in that documentary is they were selling records, but like RCA, like I was saying before, how they used to send them to the suites and give them the limos to everywhere. It's like they were treating them like they were selling millions of copies, but they weren't yet. So I kind of have that curiosity of, it's almost like someone in there had confidence that this is an evolution we're watching. This isn't it. Because I think that happens with all artists, that when you meet them and they'll present a work, unless they've been working on it for a really long time, that might just be a phase they're in. And so if you're a really experienced producer, you might let them flesh it out. You see the foundations of something new. And then, well, like this band, they took it somewhere totally different. But it's with Starman, this to me, it's good placement right after Moon Age Daydream, because it's like it's the other side. It's like Moon Age Daydream is like the aggressive, intense descriptor of Ziggy, and then this brings you back to why he's, the concept, why he's apparently on Earth, and it's a more like hopeful, approachable song.
Right. Well,
for his
he says
character.
it's crazy cosmic jive, right? I mean, it's meaning is say this is just something kind of hip. But I'm a star man. I mean, what do you want? I mean, what do you expect?
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And but again, like you said, the beat is very it's popish, but still different, still a little dangerous. Like, what is the star man? What is he up to?
And it's kind of an interesting song because the guitar, like the solo specifically, it almost sounds like Leonard Skinner or something, like it doesn't sound like you would like the rest of the album. To me it sounds more American or more like, I don't know.
It could show some American influence.
Yeah. But the and in the song it describes how this character, the Ziggy character, he's bringing hope through the radio. Which again, I'm just going to throw that back. Like, I feel like that's also tying into that celebrity ego of, I'm not just doing art that a lot of people like. It's giving meaning to people. It's giving substance. It's giving direction to people, and somehow, and while he might have written the character being in that mindset, I feel like maybe eventually all people, especially when the tickets are constantly selling out, you dive into that eventually. But this one also had a string arrangement by Ronson, and I don't know. It's just a great song, classic solo.
So like the Children Boogie. That's. I mean, it's.
It'll get stuck in your head.
Yeah,
it really will. You got anything else on that one?
What was I going to say? I don't know. I guess to me, it's just another song that it's a definitive Bowie song, and it captures that period, and to see that song, I mean, I can only imagine. Well, I do remember to a certain extent, seeing that song for the first time on some pop show and going, "What is that?" I mean, because they performed it.
They performed it.
Yeah, and
and Angie, she talks about that performance, about how a lot of musicians became musicians by being inspired by seeing that performance, because they were so comfortable, because they weren't in their positions doing their thing. No. They were one. Like I was saying before, like kind of like the Beatles in those early years, everything they did together. And so when they were on the stage, it was just another day. Let's do our thing that we've been working on. And you see that dynamic between Bowie and Ronson, where, Bowie's got his 12-string and Ronson's just wailing on his thing. And then, at one point, he wraps his arms around Ronson and they're singing the song together. And it's just it's a comfortable camaraderie, high morale group, like they're high energy. They know what they're doing.
And you're seeing his theatrics and his dress and the way his hair is, and so you're saying, okay, well, what is this? Again, what we look at and think of as rock musicians or rock bands or rock stars. This is kind of really the prototype in a certain way. In some ways, it takes this isn't the Meet the Beatles. You know what I mean? This has changed dramatically. Whereas when the Beatles or Elvis Presley arrives on the scene, and that day, parents were shocked. Oh my gosh, he's moving. Oh my gosh, their hair is so long.
Yeah, his hips are moving.
Now you get to Ziggy Stardust, like, where do we start? And so
especially with this. Well, I mean, with this album and with The Man Who Sold the World, it's like Bowie had these also like sexual themes, riddled throughout it.
He was androgynous, right? I mean, you didn't know what he was coming from. Is he, why does he look like that? Why does he look like this? Why does he dress that way?
And blunt, like just more common like sexual
he's talking about it
and with like Aladdin Sane especially, like it just gets in that more mode, which but it's so different. It's so different, especially like what you're saying at that time, like and especially if you're going to try and compare it to just a decade prior, even 5 years prior. This is you would show up in a suit and shake the host's hand and you talk, and then you go on the show and then you perform, but they would go tell you what you can't say, what you can't do. But he was kind of just letting his flag fly. Go for it. Do you have anything else on that one? So after Starman is It Ain't Easy, which I didn't know that was a cover.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a cover by an American artist named I think he's an American artist. Ron Davies is his name. That's another. What's the other one? Soul Love. Like, you know how Soul Love it has that calm, high energy vibe or jazzy vibe, and the guitar comes in on the chords and hits really hard. With It Ain't Easy, it's kind of similar kind of thing going on, because you have the harpsichord going, and then the drums and the guitar come in as the chorus hits, and it makes it just you get like a stack of bricks. It just like lays on you and it just hits you. It's an interesting song. It is a cover, but it's he makes it his own. With his character and the like it has his little like noises he makes after he says a line and stuff like that. He's sassy. Satisfied, yeah, he's being sassy when he's singing. He's not just singing this old tune or whatever. It's like he's gonna make it his own.
Yeah, he does the melodramatic.
And it doesn't really tie into the narrative. I was thinking about it, like it kind of can. How it's not going to be easy to, because the song's about it's not easy to get to heaven when you're going down. It's not easy to get to heaven if you're not living right. And so, it is talking about being aware of your actions and stuff like that, which ties into like what the audience would probably need to be aware of. So if anything, it's kind of like a reflection on that. But it's I don't know. It's a good song. But I'm sorry, I'm trying to read my notes. I don't even know. I can't understand what I read. Good Lord, I wrote it too fast.
Well, I read that too. That there were some of the songs were not necessarily. They came at part of it was conceptual. Like obviously Moonage Daydream and Starman and Ziggy and but there was some songs that they just put in. They put in there, but it still kind of fit the scheme of the the feel, the overall feel of it. But it doesn't just take away from it either. Again, like you said, that the Bowie Ronson touch, that's what you feel on that song. That they make it their own. They're like they're at that point where they're working together they can take a song and make it sound like them. Which, like you said, reflects that they had been together for a while and they spent a lot of time doing. They knew obviously what they wanted overall. But again, I don't think they so much said, well, let's make as it was going, I think, and obviously as Bowie took on the persona and began to dress like, reflect Ziggy, then the songs began to come together. And it basically, the whole album is structured that way. Yeah. The cover and everything is implying that, hey, that's him. That's the guy. But no, it is a good song. It's still like to listen to it.
Yeah. Well, and it shows. The whole album shows Ronson's profession at using how great he was at using his guitar. But it like this one, there's a few songs where the ad libs and the little sounds he's making in the background that accompany the song. It really shows how he's not just playing his guitar. He's singing with his guitar. He's talking. He's making these little noises, these little things to. Just like Bowie's adding his little, tones and different noises and ends to how he's singing. This is how this is how he's talking. He's talking to you through his guitar. It's a pretty unique song. Then after that is it's one of my favorites on the album too, Lady Stardust. That's Ronson on the piano. He does that piano part, which is really beautiful. It's really
it is.
It's a really beautiful arrangement. This one continues to describe the androgynous nature or the characters of this character, by describing him by the makeup on his face, long blonde hair, bright blue jeans, creature fair.
Lady Stardust played his songs of Darkness and Dismay.
Yeah, I really like that song. He describes Lady Stardust purposely, as this performer, but he swaps describing Lady Stardust as a he and a she on and off. He even quotes Alfred Douglas who was Oscar Wilde, if I'm not mistaken. He was like Oscar Wilde's lover.
Oh my.
And in that line where he says, I smile sadly for a love I could not obey. That's one of his lines from one of his writings. I really like this song because just like the some of the previous ones, it's theatrical. You can see it.
It's very theatrical.
You can see it. You can envision this character on stage. The people, the men, the men standing up on stairs. Standing up on chairs. It paints a picture and you can see it.
Well, that's why I laugh, because of the line, he really quite paradise. The way he says it is very sarcastic, almost, a throwaway line, just how he, I guess at the very end when he's really quite paradise, it's a very much a Ziggy description of Ziggy.
Yeah. Well, it's like he's describing like a star in his prime, in an audience that is, intrigued and focused. And it's paradise, that's what it feels like to me. It's like he's describing how it feels to be a star and how it also feels to be judged by being a star.
How you're looked at.
Yeah, and how you look, just by how you look. And that being maybe the only cue that people care about is the cover of the book. They don't care about the writer, Do you have anything else on that one?
No.
Okay. Then after that is Star. It's very fast paced, especially compared to Lady Stardust. It's got more of that kind of that 60s rock, that early 60s rock kind of sound, especially with the piano, the dun, 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 dun. But it's more, it's something more like the Stones would do, or maybe early Beatles or something. But it's Ziggy kind of pondering how he could make it all worthwhile. I mean, that's verbatim what he says in the line, but it is. That's what he's trying to figure out is how he can make, well, again, keeping the concept in mind. It's almost like, how can I do everything I want in my dreams, but then still save the world too? How can I make that the same thing? And to him, it would make it all worthwhile if he could just become the star and become the voice on the radio. It shows, and it kind of also highlights the ideas of what becoming a star is kind of like, and also the frustration, like some of this frustration that ties into that having that dream and trying to make that into a career or just a life path. It's a shorter song. Do you have anything to add for that one?
I was thinking of the lyric. Isn't that where he says, I can fall asleep at night as a rock and roll star, right?
I think so. Yeah, I could fall asleep at night as a rock and roll star. I could fall in love all right as a rock and roll star. Just watch me now.
Just watch me now.
Yeah.
I always like that. Just watch me now.
That's all I have for that one.
But again, like you said, it's a very it's a voyeurish. I mean, in other words, he doesn't want you to not watch him. In other words, and so that's really the gist of that song is keep your eyes on me because I'm the star.
Yeah.
And whether I'm the star man or I'm the star.
Yeah.
Just watch me now.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to change. I'm going to do something different.
Yeah.
But keep your eye on me because I'm it.
Yeah. And you can't miss me because.
Oh, don't miss me.
Yeah. I'm burning bright.
Yeah.
And then the following song, "Hang On to Yourself," that was what we talked about before. That was on the B side of that alternate, which is also, I'm sure, totally different from what this one would become. This one's very punk, early punk.
Great Ronson riff on that.
Yeah, it's a crazy one. It's also kind of 60s sound, more 60s sounding, but it's. And I think this also is the first song that references the spiders from Mars, in the lyrics.
Yeah, where there's
and then and the song itself, my interpretation of it is, whether it was a reminder to himself or what, is, hold on to your identity before, stardom changes you. Because, I'm sure at that point you'd seen the rise and the ending of the Beatles. You saw, and he was a big Lennon fan, so I'm sure, Lennon had it on display how over he was with the famous thing, and so, I'm sure he maybe had that in mind when he was a young musician in the 60s, appreciating their music and then seeing the toll it took, and then realizing, like, maybe I need to be careful and just remember who I am. And
or the original inspiration, Vince Taylor, meaning, you look at what happened to him. He didn't hang on to himself.
Yeah.
He lost himself. So you better, if you think you're going to make it, you better hang on to yourself. It's almost
like a warning. Like you better know who you are.
That this thing can consume you, which is the whole point, which is really what he ends up saying about Ziggy.
Him becoming. Anything else on that one? All right, cool. And the next one is Ziggy Stardust. This one has such a classic opening. Another song that'll get stuck in your head, or at least that riff will get stuck in your head. That primal, intense guitar. It's the song that also starts to describe the character, but from another perspective. It's almost like from from one of the Spiders' perspective, or from an audience member's perspective of what his legend was. What he was like to experience him or see him. It's the story of an alien rock star. That's what it is. And he has lines in it that kind of allude to inspirations from other real rock stars at the time. Like he played it left hand, but he played it all too far. Like Hendrix, it's more sexual. Like this one, not in talking about gender or anything like that. Or orientation, but just like literally, like just talking about like in sexual nature, like describing his character. And then being man, my writing's terrible. I need to type this next time. And like what we said before, this is Ziggy also getting wrapped up in being self-obsessed and being the star, and making love with his ego. Classic line.
He's the leper messiah.
Yeah. And then towards the end, he says the line, had to break up the band. So it's kind of like you're by the end of the song, the way the story is going, kind of it seems like this character's reckless. It's like he's appreciated by the audience.
He's giving them a little clue, hey, if Ziggy and the song had to break up the band, I'm going to do the same thing.
Maybe, yeah, like he's setting the precedence.
Kind of giving them a forewarning. If you're paying attention.
Yeah. It's like it's Ziggy and the Spiders. It's not.
Yeah, it's Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders. That's a classic song. You have anything else on that one? Mm-hmm. Cool. And then the one after that is another one, classic one, Suffragette City. It's a kind of got that Little Richard kind of piano inspired, shuffle or whatever you call it. I didn't know this, but this song he wrote and presented it to Mott the Hoople. And they didn't want it, and they chose all the young dudes instead, which Ronson also played the guitar on for them and toured with them to play those parts. I also read that it's not as noticeable, but it's one of Bowie's first songs that he uses a synthesizer on. Really? And the specific synthesizer he used, I don't know why I didn't do it, but I didn't write down the model of it. It was the same synthesizer that he would use with Eno on the trilogy. Well, on the whole trilogy, he would use it. Oh, really?
Like in and out,
and Heroes and Lodger.
Yeah. So it's more subtle on this song, but it's a piece of equipment that apparently they used.
He likes to use.
Well, this was the beginning of him getting familiar with it. What else? Suffragette still kind of carrying over that sexual vibe. The the classic, my favorite line, which I mean it's the chorus, but it's my favorite part of the song, is the "Don't lean on me, man, because you can't afford the ticket." It's a classic.
Yeah, she's a total blam blam. And it's a very intense neck breaking speed kind of song. It's very
it's that punk, like that kind of Ramones.
It does
kind of like that high energy.
Very intense.
It's almost like, if you're listening to this while you're driving, you're going to accidentally go 10 miles over the speed limit. Just because it's just so it's so fast paced, and then it has that false ending, and it comes back. It's a pretty cool one. And that's the second to last track on the album, actually. And then following that one is the Ender, Rock and Roll Suicide, which starts off as an acoustic piece and works its way up to the full band, and then works its way up to the band and the orchestra. With an epic ending. And, it's got that day in the life kind of feel where...
Again, a very cinematic song.
Yeah.
Very much like a montage movie type moment.
Yeah.
Like Time takes a cigarette and puts it in his mouth.
Yeah.
Put a little on your finger, then another finger. I mean, it's setting up, it's like setting up a scene,
Yeah.
And I remember when I read about, again, he thought about Vince Taylor, because he said this was suicide, what he did to his career. And so he said this is rock and roll suicide, meaning he destroyed his persona, the creation of who he was. He destroyed
all he worked for.
He destroyed it. And so it's like, to me, it's almost like he's saying, maybe that's what he's saying too, is more likely I'm going to destroy this character at some point, and
whether intentionally or
do
not.
away with him, and because there's an end to him. In other words, he saw, I'm not going to be Ziggy all my life. You know what I mean? I'm not going to go around doing that. I'm going to change and do something different.
Well, and I think maybe he had adopted a perspective that maybe not a lot of typical music listeners at the time, or musicians at the time, weren't holding, which is the artist isn't going to be the same forever. They're not going to stick around forever. The Beatles came, changed the world, went, and they're still going on, but they're different. They're totally different, and they're not going to always be here. It's like, why would I expect my persona at the time to stick? It's never stuck. So why am I going to think of that?
Again, it's like, just watch me now. It's like, I'm going to, but I know a good movie has to have a good ending. In other words, and so it has to be dramatic. It has to be, fitting clothes, and that's the song. Rock and Roll Suicide. He's give me your hand. He's selling. You can reach out and touch me, but I'm gone. I'm not going to be here much longer.
Well, this is almost like the disillusion of Ziggy. Like he's falling apart. This is him on the second half of the hill. He's coming down, and it's just, it describes him, wandering in the traffic, stumbling in the roads. He's losing his balance, his touch, and it's and with that build up, with that more subtle build up, it adds the drama, the flair of drama to this, how this is unfolding. And had this hero who originally was so proud and knew what he wanted and knew what he was, he's unraveled. He's unraveling. And that line you're talking about, the time takes a cigarette and puts it in your mouth. It's almost like that cigarette is a metaphor for life. You can either take your time and enjoy it and be purposeful in your moves, or you can blow right through it.
Well, again, I guess I go back to my massive amount of imagery from old movies, and like in particular, like Bogart and Casablanca, or movies that a lot of times you knew was the end because somebody lit a cigarette and they were talking or walking away, or
that flair of drama.
Or the camera's going away and they're lighting a cigarette. So when I think he's saying this is the end, so time takes a cigarette. In other words, this is the end. This is the close, and that's one of the reasons why I like that song so much, because it's drama, it's cinema, it's almost like as if he's performing on a theater. He's doing a piece. and he's just talking. It's no longer. But yet at the end of the song, he goes back to the performing. Give me your hand because you're wonderful. In other words, he's talking to the audience. Because when you look at those old videos, he's all at the end. He would always reach out, and the people would start reaching out. And he would go and touch their hands. Well, that was performance.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't mean Bowie wanted to interact with his fans so much
or save them in some way.
It was just this is what the character would do, right? Don't misinterpret me. I'm not.
Or it's more like this is your chance to physically connect with me. It's like you might have understood me, but we need to connect on another level. You need to touch. We need to be touched. Because give me your hand. I mean, that could be interpreted as just the general sense of it. Like, you need help. Give me your hand. Reach out. Like, I've been here radiating like a star, but you never reached out. Give me your hand. You're beautiful. What are you doing? Because my favorite line is, you're too old to lose it, too young to choose it, and the clock waits so patiently on your song. And that's kind of like the end of Ziggy.
But you don't eat when you live too long. I mean, it's very much a kind of looking back. At the same time, it's the end. Again, it's very much like a movie.
Yeah.
It's the end. You're kind of looking back at some things, and you just walk away.
It's also self-reflective. It's very dramatic. This is like the close. This is him. Right. This is him making his last statement of self-awareness and action. And because this is what it ends with, just so y'all can be aware. It says, "You're watching yourself, but you're too unfair. You got your head still tangled up. But if I could only make you care. Oh no, love, you're not alone, no matter what or who you've been, no matter when or where you've seen. All the knives seemed to lacerate your brain. I've had my share. I'll help you with your pain. You're not alone," which he yells.
He starts screaming.
And it the rest of the music kind of falls out when he says that.
Very dramatic.
That's like the height of the presentation. Yes. And he says, "Just turn on with me. You're not alone. Let's turn on and be not alone. Wonderful. Give me your hands because you're wonderful. Wonderful. Give me your hands." And then it's repeated until it ends. It's Ziggy asking for connection, before it's too late. I think it's also the human element to it, the natural sense of you don't want to be alone, but sometimes you're so down you don't want to necessarily reach out, and sometimes you need someone screaming at you, just reminding you that you're not alone.
I think it goes back to what you've said a couple of times about the rock star concept, the rock star persona, that you come to me because you think I'm going to give you meaning, or you think I know what I'm doing. I'm probably more messed up than you are. The knives seem to lacerate my brain. In other words, I got my own issues, so don't think that I'm going to be your answer. What I mean? And so it's like we can share in the moment, but I'm out. Don't hold on to that. And again, very much Bowie, as we know, was in his career, that he was going to change and he was going to take on another persona, and he was going to take another direction. But he created a character, almost like a director, a screenwriter. He came up with Ziggy. He had the band to get the music to, the background for it. He was going to perform it, and then that character was going to walk off the stage. And but of course, it had to be successful, right? I mean, he did need that success to a certain degree to get the money to keep doing what he was going to do. Yeah. But like we know now, the marketing, like you said, someone at RCA or someone said, we think he's tapping into a group of people that could become very profitable. So we'll roll the dice on him and see if he taps into that, which he did. Yeah. But it also reflects the self-destructive persona of the rock star, and the egomania of the rock star. Yeah, for sure. He's full of himself, and he knows it. I mean, he's basically telling you, this is me. Get over it. I mean, if you don't like it, that's just how I am. But I'm out. Yeah. And then the next album, Lad Insane, just kind of amplified that. Yeah, that's where he goes. I'm just a Lad Insane. Lad Insane. Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to get over what I just did, I mean, and now everybody wants a piece of me, but yeah, Ziggy is definitely to me, again, I guess it's probably the reason why I still enjoy it, because it's very cinematic. It's very movie-ish. It has to reflect that he watched movies and he liked characters. He liked that, how it looked and how it made you feel.
Yeah, the element.
Yeah, and that people who are ostracized for whatever reason, where do they identify? They identify with characters on a big screen, because I can disappear into that character.
Yeah.
I can identify with that person because they're up there and they're bigger than life. Well, he said, okay, I'll create a character that's up there and bigger than life. Oh, up there, I'll be a Starman, and then I'll perform in front of the people, and they can either choose to reject me, but if they hate me and they pay attention, they're still paying attention.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that was his point. I know, if anything, it'll get people to pay attention.
Yeah.
And if it's good, then it goes on,
Yeah.
But
and like with any type of commercial success, I mean, you start to feel yourself. You start to feel more confident in your moves. And after years of touring and being a solo artist, and then working with people, and getting a deal, getting albums out, but still not being a huge hit. Like, this was probably him. I'm not saying this was him, speaking it into the universe that he's going to be a star, but it's kind of like, as he had that intention to make this character, the character was, reflected back, what he was, and then they evolved together. As this evolved in the market, he evolved to realize, like, I could actually be this person. I could be more than this. Yeah, it's true. You have anything else?
Nope.
Cool. The only other little note I have is. It's totally speculation. It's totally an opinion of mine. For the Killers fans out there, they had an album in 2017 called Wonderful, Wonderful. That's just my last little thing. Is I feel like, because I know Brandon Flowers is a huge Bowie fan.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of songs where you could hear like the total callback. Like, there's I can't remember what specific Killer song is, but I know he's used parts that are very similar to like songs like Ashes to Ashes and just classic Bowie stuff. But I never thought of it. Because I like this album, the Killers album, Wonderful, Wonderful. It's a great album. It's a wonderful album. But I never made the connection until, because I don't listen to Rock and Roll Suicide all the time. It's a great song, but it's not one of the ones from the album that I'm like, yeah, put it on my best of playlist. And so when I was re-listening to this album last week or whatever, and I listened to it all the way through, I forgot that it ended with that echoed statement, the wonderful, wonderful at the end. So it's just totally my thought of saying,
he's
like, I wonder.
It.
Yeah, I wonder that's where it comes from.
Yeah. I agree. I would imagine.
Yeah. That's a great album. It was I think when you first showed me Bowie, it started off with Space Oddity, but then the preceding single or song that you showed me was Starman, and so Starman, and then Guitar Hero, I think like that same year had come out.
Oh yeah,
and
did.
Ziggy Stardust was on the first one.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was the first one. It might have been the second one, but definitely one of those. And so that was my introduction to Bowie. Were those three. And then as a teenager, at some point when I found out that Ziggy and Starman come from the same album, because when I was younger, I wasn't thinking in terms of albums. I wasn't thinking in terms of like a piece of work, and you just don't have that awareness. You just want what's popular, or what what your ear is keen to. And when I was a teenager and I found out that two of my favorite Bowie songs, because I would listen to those songs constantly. I even wrote a research paper about Space Oddity. But I realized that those two were on the same album. I listened to the album. I was just blown away, because it's a tremendous work.
Side note, Major Tom's another Bowie character. Right?
Oh yeah,
Space Oddity and Ashes to Ashes. He's
he comes
he's
back.
Still floating out there. Stay away from Major Tom. So stay away from Ziggy.
Yeah. Well, this is definitely a jumping off point for him as a performer in the live sense. Him as a character. Him as a celebrity, and him as a musical influence of being a chameleon, like you said.
And a great chameleon. He's the rock and roll chameleon.
The Black Star. R.I.P. All right. You got anything else?
That's it.
Cool. That's a good one. All right. Until next time, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. For more episodes, visit our website, musicmythpodcast.com, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Goodbye.